If you have stopped praying, even just for a few days, there is something happening to you right now, that you cannot see yet, but it's already affecting your life. Most Christians never realize it until prayer becomes difficult. Not necessarily because they are lazy, but because something inside them has already shifted. Stay with me. We have a lot to talk about. Do you know that the adversary, or Hasatan, or Satan as we call him, if he wants to get you down, sometimes he doesn't necessarily need to come to tempt you with a big sin. He just simply and slowly makes you numb. And that's just fine with him, because when you are numb, you lose sensitivity with God. And that is where the disconnect begins. Some of you watching this video are not under any attack because the devil is afraid of you. No, you are under attack because you have become spiritually disconnected and you don't even know it yet. That feeling you call stress, that strange emptiness, that constant mental noise, what if it's not just emotional? What if your spirit has been starving silently? Here's the scary part. The first sign of prayerlessness is not even sin, it is silence. You stop hearing from God clearly. You stop feeling conviction strongly. You stop sensing spiritual danger quickly. But because nothing dramatic happens immediately, you assume everything is fine. That is how spiritual collapse begins, quietly. And I need you to listen carefully, because this video is for you who still goes to church but secretly feels spiritually weak. That person used to pray with fire but now struggles to pray for even 5 minutes. That person who smiles publicly but privately feels disconnected from God, because something dangerous happens when prayer disappears from your life. And most believers notice it too late. A close friend once said something to me which I found quite disturbing. He said to me, "I still worship, I still quote Bible verses, but deep down, I think something inside me has died." That sentence stayed in my mind for days, because this man was not living in obvious sin. He was still functioning normally, still attending church, still laughing with people, still looking Christian. But internally, he said he felt spiritual numb. And then he admitted something else. He had stopped praying constantly almost 8 months earlier. Not intentionally, just gradually. And this is where people misunderstand spiritual danger. Most people think Satan destroys believers through massive temptations. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he simply removes the prayer slowly until your spirit becomes too weak to resist what is coming next. And I need you to get this clearly. Many Christians today, what they face may not be spiritual attack. They are simply spiritually malnourished. There's a difference, because demons are not the only things that can weaken a believer. Distance from God also can. Maybe that explains why your peace disappears so quickly now, why temptation feels stronger lately, why your mind feels louder than before, why prayer itself suddenly feels like an Herculean task, suddenly difficult, because prayerlessness changes you before it destroys you. And I think this is not talked about enough. Let me reveal something most believers most often don't notice. Prayer is where your identity stays alive. Without prayer, you slowly forget who you are spiritually. And when identity fades, other voices become louder. Fear itself becomes louder. Lust becomes louder. Insecurity becomes louder. And eventually, you start making decisions based on emotions instead of discernment. This is why some Christians suddenly enter relationships they once would have avoided, suddenly normalizes sin they once hated, suddenly loses hunger for God completely. It did not happen overnight. The connection weakened first. This is why the enemy fights your prayer life more than almost everything else, because a disconnected believer is easier to influence. Notice something terrifying. Jesus never told Peter, watch and pray so that you become successful and blessed. No, nada. He said, watch and pray so you do not enter temptation. Meaning, prayer protects more than people realize. And honestly, some of the battles in your life right now are not because God abandoned you. It is because your spiritual defense has weakened quietly. That may sound uncomfortable, but it's true. Here's another revelation most Christians never think about. The devil is patient. You know that? He understands that obvious destruction scares believers. So instead of attacking you suddenly, he distracts gradually. A little more scrolling, a little less prayer, a little more entertainment, a little less silence with God. And eventually, you become spiritually overstimulated, but spiritually empty as well. That is the modern Christian crisis. I'm talking of lack of intimacy with God. A lot of Christians, they know sermons, they listen to podcasts, they know a lot of songs, but they cannot survive 1 hour with God anymore. And that should alarm you, because the more uncomfortable silence becomes, the more spiritually disconnected you already may be. Because maybe the reason why you constantly need noise, music, video, notifications is because silence now exposes how distant you feel from God. And that is why many people avoid prayer, not because they hate God, but because prayer exposes what distraction hides. Now, let me show you something you may not have noticed in the story of Samson in the Bible. A lot of people think Samson lost his strength the moment his hair was caught, but no, that was only the visible moment, because the real collapse started much earlier. Small compromises, ignored warnings, spiritual carelessness, until eventually the Bible says something chilling but also terrifying. He did not know that the Lord had left him. Now let me repeat that. He did not know that the Lord had left him. Do you know how dangerous that sounds to a believer? That line should honestly frighten a believer, because it means it is possible to keep functioning publicly while spiritually empty privately. Possible to still sing worship songs, still preach, still look spiritual while disconnected internally. If you're not careful, you can become so used to spiritual weakness that you start calling it normal Christianity. That is what is happening to many believers right now, maybe even to you. Because when prayer dies, conviction fades slowly, not instantly, slowly. That is why some things that once disturbed your spirit no longer bothers you. And if conviction becomes weak long enough, compromise starts feeling reasonable. That is when danger multiplies. But let me tell you the most dangerous state of prayerlessness. It is not when you stop praying completely. It is when you stop missing God. That stage is dangerous, because once a person becomes comfortable without God's presence, then you stop fighting to return. Maybe this is why you clicked this video, because deep down, you know something has changed inside you. Still believe in God, but the fire is not the same. The hunger is not the same. The sensitivity is not the same. Honestly, you are tired of pretending everything is okay. But listen carefully. If you can still feel conviction while hearing this message, it means your spirit is not dead. There is still hope, because The enemy's greatest fear is not a perfect Christian. The enemy's greatest fear is a believer who reconnects with God again. One genuine prayer can restart spiritual fire. One sincere moment with God can break months of numbness. And I'm not talking about mere religious practice or just another ritual. I'm not talking about performance. And this is where most people misunderstand God completely. Some of you stopped praying because you think God is disappointed in you. You failed and you become inconsistent. You fell into temptation. You became spiritually cold, and now shame keeps you away from prayer. But that's a trap, and you should know it, because prayer is not a reward for spiritually strong people. Prayer is when weak people receive strength. If sick people avoid hospital, they die. And if spiritually weak people avoid prayer, they weaken even more. That is exactly what the enemy wants. Distance. Yes, because distance weakens discernment. Distance weakens conviction. Distance weakens spiritual authority. And eventually you become vulnerable to battles you once would have overcome easily. So let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you sat down to have a quiet time with God without rushing, without checking your phones, without pretending, without any form of distraction, and truly commune with Him? Because maybe what your soul is craving for right now is not another motivational video. Maybe your spirit is desperate for God again, and maybe this video is not random. Maybe heaven interrupted your scrolling today or tonight because your spiritual life is drifting quietly and it had to do something about it. And God is trying to wake you up before numbness becomes normal. So tonight or today, see that you pray again, even if it feels awkward, even if you feel nothing initially, even if your voice shakes. Pray again, because some versions of you will never exist until you reconnect with God deeply again. Some peace only returns through prayer. Some clarity only returns through prayer. Some strength only returns through prayer. Maybe your spiritual life does not need more entertainment right now. It needs more revival. Now, if you are serious about your spiritual growth and your spiritual life and you want to become more intimate with God because you know deep down in you feel this hunger for God, I need you to subscribe to this channel right now. Let's go on a spiritual journey together and check out my other inspiring videos designed by God's grace to really edify and elevate your spirit man. Like this video if it blessed you, and I will see you in the next video. Don't forget, let love guide you, not fear.